All right. Well, good morning, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to today's Exploring by the Sea to Your Pants event. My name is Joe Grabowski, and I will be your host and your speaker for today. So for those who are starting to tune in live via YouTube, we had a little change of plans with our Grace Gorilla hangout today. We are expecting a hangout, but due to some personnel changes, they had to postpone for us today. So I'm going to jump in today and I'm going to be today's guest speaker. So we're taking a little trip away from maybe the mountainous regions of the Congo, and instead we're going to go to the deep sea. So I myself, I am a science educator. I am an explorer with the National Geographic Society. And recently I was able to go on a really cool deep sea expedition off the coast of California in the Monterey Bay Marine National Sanctuary. We spent 2 weeks out on the ocean using remotely operated vehicles. So robots we could control from the ship. We could dive them 3-4 kilometers deep. And we were exploring places that nobody on Earth, nobody on the planet has ever explored before. So some of you may know this already, but we have better maps of the moon and Mars than we do of the deep sea. So we were exploring regions that no human eyes had ever set on before. So I'm going to share my screen now. I've got a PowerPoint presentation with some cool pictures and video. If one of the teachers joining live, if for some reason it doesn't share, let me know. But otherwise, I will assume that it has, and I'm going to go full screen now. So here we go. All right. And I think I just need to swap displays because you can probably see the presenter view right now. So let me fix that. There we go. Okay, so just send me a message. If you're having any trouble, if it's not full screen, just turn your mic on and let me know, but it should be full screen now. All right. So I've been scuba diving for over 10 years now. I learned when I lived in Australia and I've been diving ever since. So of course, before getting onto the boat, I had to do a little bit of scuba diving. So this is a kelp forest. So it doesn't look like much. There's a little bit of green you can see here at Point Lobos Park, just outside of Monterey. And actually, I just see a message from a classroom. So I'm just going to double check that you guys can see me okay. Doesn't seem to be full screen anymore. Okay, let me know if this fixes it. Is it full screen now? Yes, okay, perfect. All right, back to business. So doesn't look like much, but when you're under the water, this really is a forest. This kelp plants are over 30 feet high. They're stretching up to the sunlight, and there's a ton of life in the kelp forest. So I have this neat little video here that I'll share. This is myself and another National Geographic explorer, and we're so excited to be doing what we're doing that we had our National Geographic flags and we took this little video here. So there we are in the kelp forest doing a little dive in. All right. Now, also in California, you may know that there's giant redwood trees, some of the tallest, oldest trees on the planet. So we spent a little bit of time hiking in the redwoods, and you can see these are pretty big trees, even though by redwood standards, these are actually kind of small trees. And then with my friend, another explorer, his name's Joe Cutler, we did some tide pooling at night. So we waited until the tide went out and there were little pools left behind of ocean water. And we had our little flashlights and we found some awesome sea creatures in those tide pools. So here's a crab. Here's a sea anemone. You can see it's got beautiful, beautiful green colors, but you wouldn't want to touch it because they do sting. Here's a bat star. Kind of cool looking. This one's out of the water. So hopefully it made its way back in. Another little crab. And then I'm excited to share these next two pictures with you because I've been diving places like Mexico and Australia, the Galapagos, and I have seen octopus before. And they're always really big, you know, size of a dinner plate, not counting their legs. So they're really big. So I was really surprised when we found these little guys in the tide pool. So look at that, this little octopus, barely as big as two of my fingers. We found in the tide pool. And then I've got a little bit of a closer up picture here. You can see his little eyes. So small, so neat to see such a small little octopus in the tide pool. So after a little bit of fun, it was time to go and meet the rest of the expedition team and get out on the ocean. So this is San Francisco. This is a view of downtown San Francisco. And this is where I met the ship. So this is the ship. This is the exploration vessel Nautilus. And this was my home for 2 weeks with a crew of scientists, communicators, navigators, engineers who run the ship, and other crew members. So it was like being in a small little, almost like a small little apartment building with all kinds of really cool people to spend 2 weeks with and do some research and learn from. So we sailed out under the Golden Gate Bridge. You can see the bridge there, and you can see the city of San Francisco in the background. There's just another shot as we leave land and San Francisco behind. And then I want to share this little video with you. This is a cool little video. This is one of the remotely operated vehicles. I'm just going to turn the volume down a little bit. It's a little bit loud. And I'll just talk over it. So this is Hercules. Hercules weighs about 5,000 pounds, costs several millions of dollars to make and take care of. And Hercules is a robot that allows us to explore the deep sea where humans can't go. So Hercules is covered in high definition cameras, in lights. It has 2 arms it can use to take samples of rock and sea life down at the bottom of the ocean. It has special compartments along the side to put that material in until we bring it back up to the surface. So this is what it's like when we get Hercules ready on the crane and slowly lower Hercules into the water. And then on this particular dive, Hercules disappeared for about 36 hours. Took 3 hours to get down to the bottom, spent about 30 hours exploring, taking video, taking samples, and then another 3 hours to get Hercules back up to the top and back on the ship so we could move to a new spot and do the same thing all over again. So we were sitting comfortable in a control van. There were navigators, there were ROV pilots who were controlling Hercules. I was a communication fellow, which meant I was talking live. All this was live. The cameras from the ROV and classrooms from all over the world could tune in live and see these new parts of the ocean. So that was my job, was to talk to those classrooms, to talk to the scientists, and talk about what we were seeing during this expedition. So this is another ROV. This is Argos. This is Hercules' buddy. So they always go down together at the same time. They're tethered together. And Argos has cameras of its own. It could technically go deeper, go up to 6 kilometers deep. And its job, as well as taking some video and watching Hercules below, is to absorb some of the wave motion. So if you can imagine, a ship is moving up and down on the water, and that would make an ROV down at the bottom very shaky. So what Argos does is it keeps slack. It keeps the cord loose between Argos and Hercules, and that makes sure that Hercules stays nice and steady instead of getting images that are bouncing around like crazy, because the ocean doesn't really sit still. Here's where we're exploring. So here is my cursor over there. This is the marine sanctuary. All of this red is the marine sanctuary. This is San Francisco. So this is where we left from. This is where I was diving in Monterey. And then this is where we were diving the ROVs. This is called Davidson Seamount. It's an extinct volcano. It's been extinct for millions of years. And this is what we were exploring, depths of 3 to 4 kilometers on Davidson Seamount. So you can see we're quite a ways out there. We're far from land, no land in sight, out in the open ocean. And did we ever see some cool things? So first, I'll tell you what these lasers are. You can see these green lasers here. And these are 10 centimeters apart. So that means we can put them on a creature or a coral or something, and we can get a good measurement of how big it is. So this is a pycnogonid. It's also called a sea spider. And you can see by looking at those laser lights that it's probably about 30 centimeters across, so about a foot across. So a big, big creature that looks like an underwater spider called a pycnogonid. This is the scariest image that a remotely operated vehicle or ROV pilot can see. This is a fishing net. So this fishing net, maybe it fell off of a ship, maybe it was thrown into the ocean on purpose. It sank over 3 kilometers, and now it's sitting kind of spread out on the bottom of the ocean. So that's bad for a few reasons. The first one being that sea creatures can still get trapped in it, and there's nothing they can do really to escape. And then if you're driving a robot 3 kilometers beneath the ocean and you get it tangled in a fishing net, it is not going to be easy to get that ROV back. So the ROV pilots had to be really careful to steer wide, wide, wide around this fishing net and avoid it. Now, there's not a lot of food that grows deep in the ocean, but a lot of the nutrients come from the surface. So as you descend with the remotely operated vehicle, you see what looks like snow, and that's called marine snow, and it's actually particles. So plankton and zooplankton sink to the bottom when they die. Plants like this piece of kelp. So this is a piece of kelp that sank to the bottom, and these sea pigs, which are a type of sea cucumber, and these urchins are feeding on this kelp that drifted out and sank to the bottom of the ocean. So there's times, you know, fish, sharks, whales, they sink to the bottom as well when they die, and that's a big source of food for creatures in the deep sea. So there's actually a lot of nutrients trapped in the deep ocean because everything that dies higher up sinks down to the bottom. Now there's no light. So animals are adapted to live in the dark. So this lizardfish is an awesome, awesome example. It doesn't have any color because no one could see it anyways. Its eyes are really big. So maybe if there's bioluminescence, so a creature that can make a little bit of light, it could see it, but it's an ambush predator. So it waits at the bottom. It's got this big mouth, almost like a crocodile. And when a fish or something else swims over top, it pops up and grabs it. So all along the side here, it has an extra special system called a lateral line system. And this lets it feel movement, pressure changes in the water. So if something's swimming by, it knows it's close by. So really cool adaptations for the bottom of the ocean. And even though you're 3 kilometers down in the ocean, you still see evidence of humans. So we saw old paint cans and balloons, fishing nets and things like that. Here's a Dr. Pepper can that maybe fell off a boat or something and sank down to the bottom here. So you can see a little urchin and a cryanid on top of that Dr. Pepper can. Now, Hercules has an important job to do, and that's to take samples because we don't know a lot about the deep ocean, and there's a lot of new species for us to discover. So this is Hercules taking a sample of a sponge. So this doesn't look like much, this sponge, but this sponge is an animal, but it's a crazy kind of animal that has no eyes, no mouth, no brain or heart, but still considered an animal. What it does all day long is it filters water. It sucks in water and then filters out things like bacteria, and then that water comes back out the other end of the sponge. So sponges can cycle an incredibly large amount of water. Sometimes when the samples are really delicate, instead of using the pincher arm, we use the slurp. So this looks, well, just like it is. It's a vacuum hose that we can use to suck up a softer sample if it's too delicate to try to grab with the pincher arm. And there's another picture of the pincher arm. It's got a stalked cryanid and it's dropping it into a sample box. And if you look out front, you can see there's rocks here. So we are taking some rock samples as well to bring to the top. And there is so much biodiversity in the deep sea. It's so cool. This is just one tiny little snapshot of a tiny little piece of the ocean floor. And there's quite a few different species here. This is a sea cucumber, a big purple thing. Here's a sea anemone. Here's an acorn worm. This purple thing looks like it has arms almost. This is some deep sea coral. And then right next to the deep sea coral is a cryanid, a drifting cryanid. It just kind of drifts through the ocean current. So in a small, tiny little piece of the deep sea, which a lot of people think, is empty and barren, there's actually a lot of life that you can find. And you can even find bigger life like this octopus. We saw a lot of these octopus. I'm going to tell you a little story about these octopus in a moment. I've got a little video that goes with it. But this is a moose octopus robustus. That's its scientific name. And it's a pretty cool purple looking octopus. And then another example of another sea creature This is a cuss eel. Again, no color. Its eyes don't really work. It's got big eyes, so if there's tiny bits of light, then it might be able to see it. But then it has these little feelers that can help it kind of feel its environment. And then it has that same lateral line system that helps it feel pressure or movement near its body. So the cuss eel is another example of a really cool deep sea creature adapted to living in the dark at very, very deep depths. Got a little video clip here. Let's share a couple of these. So this first one's really cool. This is, well, it's sometimes called the Dumbo octopus. It's sometimes called an umbrella octopus. And I think if you watch this video for a little moment, you'll see why it gets that name, Dumbo octopus and umbrella octopus. So we have no idea how rare these are. We could be seeing something that's really rare, or we could be seeing something that you find all the time, all over the deep sea. We just don't know yet because we haven't explored the deep sea enough. But I think you'll agree with me that it is pretty cool when you get a chance to see creatures like these. And then we're able to take these videos and broadcast them live to students and to people all over the world. So I think you can probably see where that name comes from. It gets that kind of that Dumbo name from, they look like ears, like the movie Dumbo, that elephant, but they're actually fins. So they use them to help move through the water. And then when it opens and closes those tentacles, it looks a lot like an umbrella that's opening and closing. So really cool to be able to see that Dumbo octopus. And I mentioned that other octopus. I showed you that purple one a little bit earlier. So I'm going to share a little video because this is pretty special. This, we're going along the bottom with the remotely operated vehicle. We were almost ready to bring it to the surface. It was pretty much time, you know, it's been like a 36-hour dive. It's time to bring the vehicle back. And then we spotted this. We spotted a group of the purple octopus, and they were all upside down. Oops. And you can see they're protecting eggs. So this was a group of about maybe 15 of them. They were all upside down. They were protecting their eggs. And then we started to go a little bit further, following kind of the cracks and crevices in the rock. And we started to see more, all doing the same thing, turned upside down, protecting eggs. So they must have been females. And the more we went along, the more we found. So 12 turned into 30, turned into 100, turned into over 1,000 of these octopus. So right now you're getting a bird's eye view. You're seeing Argos, the smaller ROV, looking down on Hercules. And you can see that all along these crevices, we've got these brooding, which means they're protecting their eggs, these brooding female octopus. It's pretty amazing. So what we found was the deepest and largest colony of octopus, of brooding octopus ever seen before. So pretty awesome. You know, we weren't expecting it, and this is what we found. And then we're able to broadcast live. And then when we got really close, you could see the water shimmering around them. And what that means is the water is a little bit warmer in those cracks and crevices. Why? Well, probably because even though the Davidson Seamount is an extinct volcano, there still must be some cracks, some crevices that are allowing some heat to escape from the earth. And that is probably why the octopus like those spots. It's a little bit warmer for letting their eggs develop. So really cool to see what we saw. And that's just a little picture of Argos took of Hercules looking at one of the big groups of the octopus. And then it's not always easy on a ship. The weather can get pretty rough. So here is the communications room. This is where we do live events with classrooms and other people and share what we are up to. So this is what it looked like normally. Then this is what it looks like after a storm hit. So you can see that everything was knocked over. The waves got really rough, and I've got a little video here that's going to show you just how rough those waves got. So let me hit play here. There we go. So you can see just how much, it looks like a beautiful, nice day, but there was a big swell on the ocean. So you can imagine trying to walk around, trying to make food, stuff like that, when the ship is moving this much. Pretty cool. Sometimes you think the side's going to dip into the water, it leans over so much. All right. And there's another neat little video that I'm going to share with you. You're out in the middle of the ocean and it's empty sometimes. You look around and for hours and hours, days and days, you don't see anything. And I hope this video shows up. It was really bright, but out of nowhere, a pod of hundreds of dolphins showed up and were swimming around the ship. So hopefully you can see them in this video, jumping and swimming. They came out of nowhere. Suddenly there were tons of them. All that splash around us is dolphins. The whole ocean exploded around us with dolphins. You can see them jumping. Totally crazy. This lasted for about maybe 2 minutes and they all disappeared. So sometimes you're just in the middle of nowhere. You see nothing but ocean for days and days. And then suddenly there's thousands of dolphins jumping and swimming around the boat, hunting, and then they just disappear. Pretty wild. So as far as you can see, that splashing is all around us, and that white, that splashing is all jumping dolphins. Pretty cool. Just swimming along, doing their thing. All right. And then the last little picture I want to show you is I was on the boat over Halloween. So scientists, they like to have fun too. So here's some of us in our Halloween costumes. And I don't know if anybody in any of the classrooms likes Pokemon, but my guy Finn, he's 7, he loves Pokemon. So I found a full body Pikachu suit and I put a mask on it. So instead of Pikachu, I was Scuba-Chew. So I celebrated Halloween on the ocean. So it was just start to finish. It was such an incredible trip, such an amazing expedition. We learned so much. We saw so many new things. I hope you enjoyed hearing about it, seeing some of the pictures, some of the video, and I would love to stop the screen share. So I'm going to come back to you now. I should be back now. And I would love to take some of your questions. So I want to give a shout out to any classrooms who are tuning in right now via YouTube. Let's see, do we have some here? Let's see, Oshawa, Ontario, we've got some kindergartners hanging out. We've got some grade 5, 6s of Mrs. Mitchell. Mount Airy, North Carolina, Miss Hall's group's joining us. We've got a group in Miami with Mrs. Place, Miss Basalto's class. Awesome. So we do have classrooms joining us on YouTube. Send in some questions and I'll make sure that I answer some of those. Oh, 4th grade in Montana as well with Mrs. Cheryl. So awesome to have so many students joining in. Let's go to Mrs. Reed's class first. They are in Algonquin, Illinois, 4th graders. I'm going to turn your microphone on once I find it. How are we doing, 4th graders?
Very good. Tell them. 5th. Johnny, stand up.
Awesome. Who's got a question?
Why are there different colors of octopus?
Why are there different colors of octopus? Well, that's a really good question. And I'll tell you, I'm not an octopus expert, but I'll tell you what I do know about them. And what I do know about them is many species of octopus can change their colors. So if you have some time, jump on YouTube and look at octopus changing colors. So a really amazing defense that octopus do have is the ability to change color. So blend into their surroundings and really complicated patterns, even patterns like checkerboard, they're able to replicate for their camouflage. So I would think that the octopus that don't really change color much, that they're a good color for their environment, and those that do are able to move around more, explore more areas, and then use those kind of color changes. And a lot of octopus only come out at night, so they're nocturnal. So that's another thing that kind of helps them blend in. And then octopus can do all sorts of cool things. If you have time, look up the mimic octopus. So the mimic octopus can take different shapes, like the shape of a shark and things like that. So they try to take different shapes with their body to fool predators. And then another crazy thing about octopus is that they can squeeze into really small places. So if their beak, which usually isn't very big, that's what they eat with, if their beak can fit through, they can squeeze the rest of their body through. So pretty wild. And, you know, being invertebrates without much bone structure means they can slide through really small spaces. So good question to get things rolling. Let's go now to Mrs. McIntosh's group, 5th graders in Brampton, Ontario. Let me get that microphone turned on. Oh, there it goes. How we doing, Brampton? Oh, it went off again. Let me try that again. Oh, it's on.
Go ahead, Ducky.
Okay, try that again.
My name is
Brampton.
Ethan. Question is,
Oh, I missed the last part, but I heard.
have
my
you ever
question.
encountered a shark on your
Okay, very cool question. So on this,
Have you ever seen a shark?
Yep. So on this particular expedition, we only saw one, and it's because we were doing most of our stuff in the deep sea, and we're using something really cool called a drop cam. So a drop cam is like a big glass ball, really thick, so it can go really deep, and there's a camera put inside of it. And we drop that down with a weight. We'll drop that down 3, 4, 5, 6 kilometers deep. And then it sits under there. It's got bright lights on it, and anything that swims by turns the camera on. So we get video of deep sea creatures using this little drop cam. And then when, 6 hours, 12 hours is over, it lets go of the weight and it comes back to the top, and we can pick it up and use it. So we were using some of those drop cams, and we did see a shark. We thought it was maybe a sleeper shark. So you might want to look that up online. But diving, I get to dive with sharks a lot. So I've been diving with white tip and black tip reef sharks, with gray reef sharks, with nurse sharks. What else? Port Jackson sharks, Caribbean reef sharks, bull sharks. So I've got to see lots of really cool sharks while scuba diving. But my favorite, and if there's time at the end, I'll show you a little video of scuba diving with great hammerhead sharks. So these sharks were 12 feet long, and they were so cool. So I can share a little bit of video if we have time right at the very end. Let's see, Smith Falls, Ontario, Mrs. Davies group. Let me get that microphone turned on. How we doing, Smith Falls?
Good.
Good.
Okay, what's your question?
Do you work with Jill Heiner?
All right. So for those who might not know, Jill Heiner is a Canadian. She is an explorer in residence of the Royal Canadian Geographical Society. And she is one of the best cave divers in the world. So she goes around the world. She dives in caves, underwater caves, does research, video, all kinds of really cool things. And Jill, I do know Jill. Jill is a friend of mine. Jill is a member of actually Exploring by the Seat of Your Pants, of our board of directors. So if I ever have a question or need some advice, I'll reach out to Jill and see what she thinks. So yeah, absolutely. I know Jill, and I'm just going to turn your mic back on. Do you guys know Jill? Have you seen her in a video, or has she been to your class?
Yes.
We Skyped with her.
Oh, you Skyped with her. Very cool. Well, Jill is an awesome guest. Did she show you some really cool deep sea pictures?
Yeah.
Yeah.
She does other stuff too. She dives under the sea ice. She's one of few people who have been inside of a cave on an iceberg. So not a very safe place to dive, but she's one of the few people who have been diving there. So what she does is risky, but she gets to explore some of the most remote places on the planet, which is pretty cool. So I'm glad you guys got to spend some time with Jill.
Quiet.
All right, let me pop onto YouTube and see if we have any questions that came in there. Oh yeah, lots of questions. Oh, shout out to Red Deer, Alberta. Looks like Miss Fran's group is joining us today. Very cool. Let's see, did we name the robot? So, and I can see another one asking about Greek mythology. So yes, both of those robots do have relationship to Greek mythology. So Hercules gets that name because Hercules is big and strong, and it's a perfect name for an ROV like Hercules, which is big. It's strong. Yeah, and so it can go really, really deep. And then Argus in Greek mythology was a many-eyed giant. So I think Argus got the name because it's got a big camera at the front, a big high-definition camera, and I think that is why it got that name. So yes, both of them are definitely their names are both tied to Greek mythology. Let's see if we can grab another question here. Oh, cool. Another classroom is wondering about the volcano, if it's extinct. And so, yes, it is. And I believe about 9 million years since that volcano would have been active. And it's a deep sea volcano, so it would have been below the surface. And so it's not active, but we did find that evidence, that shimmering water, that there must still be some kind of connection, some kind of vent to the, into the crust of the earth that allows kind of that warmer water to escape. So that's kind of cool. Obviously, still more research needs to be done. And one more question from online: did we sleep on the boat? Absolutely. We spent 10 days on the boat. Most of the time, we couldn't see the shore, so we were sleeping in bunks, and we had different watches. So you'd be on for 4 hours, off for 4 hours, or 8 hours, on for another 4 hours, off for 8 hours. So I had to be on, what was my shift? It was 4 till 8. Yeah, I think that was mine. Or was it 8 till 4? Yeah, I think it was 4 till 8. So really early in the morning and then middle of the afternoon. So the morning ones were a bit tough, but the rest wasn't too bad. All right, let's jump back to our classrooms. Let's start with Mrs. Reed's group and see if they have another question.
My name is Aiden, and how much plastic bottles are under the sea?
All right, Aiden, really good question. And unfortunately, the answer that I have to give you is we don't know, but it is a lot. So let me tell you about plastics for a minute. So each year, we dump about 9 million tons of plastic into our ocean, sometimes by accident, sometimes on purpose. And then that's the equivalent to about a dump truck worth of plastics every minute. So that's a lot of plastic getting into our ocean. The thing about plastics, and the reason why humans make so much of it, is because it's a product that can last a really long time. So if you make something out of plastic, it's going to last a long time. The problem is we're taking something that's meant to last a long time and using it for things that we use once and throw away. So, spoons, water bottles, things like that, we use once and throw away. Well, now it's going to be thousands of years before that plastic breaks down. And what happens in the ocean, the plastic gets in the ocean, it is broken down by sunlight. So not broken down disappearing, but just broken down into smaller and smaller pieces. And then when they get so small, you can barely see them, they're called microplastics. Then those microplastics are eaten by fish and birds and turtles by mistake because it looks like little bits of food. And then, that can kill them. Same thing with whales. Whales ingest plastic bags. Some whales are found with hundreds of plastic bags in their stomach because it looks a lot like the food that they eat. So unfortunately, there's a ton of plastic in our ocean, and it's at all different levels. There's some on the surface, there's some that floats beneath the surface, and then there's a lot that does sink down to the very bottom. So what we need to do, it's important that at some stage we try to clean some of it out of the ocean, but it's even more important that we stop putting it in. So a good example here is if you were at home and your bathtub was turned on, but it was plugged and it was starting to spill over the top and flood your bathroom. Would you grab a mop and mop the floor, or would you turn the tap off, right? So we need to turn the tap off first, stop putting plastic in, then we can worry about trying to take some of it out as well. Really good question. All right. Let's jump back to Mrs. McIntosh's group and see if they have a question. All right, I think we're both competing with a microphone, so let me try it one more time. All right, looks like it's on.
What was your scariest moment under the sea?
Scariest moment under the sea. You know what? I've been diving in a lot of different places, and personally, I haven't had anything too scary, but I have seen things happen to other people. So diving is a pretty safe sport, especially if you train, and especially if you dive in places that, you have to get a certification. So if you want to dive really deep, you have to train and get a certification. If you want to dive inside of shipwrecks or caves, you have to train and get a certification. So one time I was diving off the coast of North Carolina. And off the coast of North Carolina, there's tons of ships that sank during the World Wars, World War I, World War II. And I was diving on a German U-boat. So that's a submarine that was depth charged by the Coast Guard in 1942, and it sank to the bottom. And I had a great dive, made it back to the top. It was 118 feet deep, no problem. But there was a really strong ocean current, and a diver on her way down got distracted, and the ocean current pulled her away from the ship. So that's pretty scary because we were 30 miles offshore. By the time someone noticed she was missing, most of us were already back on the boat. So everybody was looking, trying to spot her, and the waves were moving. So it was a real scary few minutes when we were trying to find that diver. Luckily, one of the dive masters spotted her, just this little black bobbing shape in the distance, and we were able to pick her up. So lucky for me, I haven't really had any scary things happen to me underwater. I have good equipment and I do lots of training, but accidents do happen. And that's an example of a time when we were really scared that maybe we lost a diver. So that wasn't a good time, but it was good that we found that person. All right, Mrs. Davey, do you guys have another question?
Hey, Carson.
How did the volcano become extinct?
All right, that's another great question. So there's a few ways volcanoes can become extinct, but I think the way that it happens the most is something happens, maybe a large explosion or a large eruption, and it kind of empties out the chamber of that volcano. And then sometimes that volcano can be blocked. So, a volcano or an undersea volcano is essentially just a hole in the Earth's crust. It's a hole in the Earth's crust. Think of the Earth like an apple, and where we are is the skin. So it's a tiny little layer of land that we live on, floating on a massive pool of molten rock, of liquid rock. And so even though it looks like the world, if you look at a map, has looked like that for a long time, if we go back in time millions and millions of years ago, hundreds of millions of years ago, the land always is moving. It's called continental drift. The land is moving and slowly floating on this ocean of molten rock. So if you look at a map and you look at South America and you look at Africa, you can see where the two of them fit together at one time. And every year, the continents move about a fingernail. So if you look at your fingernail, the little white part that grows on your fingernail, that's about how much the continents move in a year, is about that much. So volcanoes can stop erupting if the hot spot moves away. And it can also stop erupting if maybe that gap is closed. Maybe a large eruption kind of plugs that area. So there's a few different reasons why a volcano can go extinct. The Galapagos is a great example. Really cool islands off the coast of Ecuador, but they slowly move along the bottom of the ocean like a conveyor belt. So when the islands are over the hot spot, they're volcanically active, they can erupt, but when they move away from the hot spot, they're extinct. They don't erupt anymore. Really good question. Hope that helps. Have you ever, so this is online, Miss Mitchell's class is wondering, have you ever seen the Great Pacific Garbage Patch? So there are 5 spots called gyres in the oceans, and that's just where the currents kind of swirl, and that's where things tend to group. So a lot of garbage can drift into those areas. And you've probably heard people say things like the Great Pacific Garbage Patch is the size of Texas, twice the size of Texas. And that's misleading, because the garbage patch, if you were to go out there right now, right into the middle of it and look, you probably wouldn't see anything. You might see a couple little pieces of plastic floating around. So it's not like an island that you can jump onto and walk on. But if you drag a net through that water, you'll get a soupy mix of broken down pieces of plastic that have been broken down by the sun over time and become microplastics. You'll see some bigger pieces floating as well. Some is on the surface, some is floating, a few meters below the surface. So it's not what I think some people picture, this big island the size of 2 of Texas's. It's actually more of like a collection of material that you would see if you were dragging a net through. So it's not actually like a trash island. I hope that helps. And let's see if I can take one more question. So another class is wondering about the most dangerous creature that I've seen in the ocean. I'm going to give 2 answers. The first one's kind of a funny one, and I'm going to say humans, because we do so much damage to our oceans. We have enough fishing boats on Earth to fish a planet 3 times our size. So we are fishing way too much from our oceans. Species like sharks and tunas, some of their populations are dropping by 90%. We're putting plastics and other pollutants in our oceans. Temperatures rising, so glaciers are melting. So the most dangerous thing I've seen in creature in the ocean is humans. But if I had to pick one that's dangerous to humans, I would say it's a stonefish. So look up stonefish if you can. Stonefish have awesome camouflage. I'd say on average, they're about this big. So most of the time they look like a piece of coral or a piece of rock. But if you were to accidentally put your hand on it, their spines on their back are full of venom. And that venom is strong enough in some species to kill a human. So that's probably the most dangerous creature that I've ever encountered while scuba diving. And I know you're going to say, but you've been diving with sharks. But every time I've ever been in the water with sharks, it's more them swimming away from us than us having to be afraid of sharks. All right. So what do you think? Do you want to see that hammerhead shark video before we wrap up for today? Should I look up that video? And then maybe we can try and squeeze in one more question from each of our camera classrooms. All right. Let me get that video of the shark. I have it right here. I just have to jump to YouTube and switch the video. So I was in the Bahamas, a place called Bimini, these 2 beautiful islands off the coast of Florida. And I got to spend 6 hours on the bottom of the ocean with these guys. So let me share my screen here. And you can see these awesome, awesome, awesome sharks. So all along the bottom, you can see nurse sharks. And they come out at night. They feed on things at the bottom like crabs. And then here come the hammerheads. Sometimes they come really close, like you'll see this one come for a really close visit. All right, so I want to share, and actually this one's going to load right after it. So this is, in this one, you're going to get to see the sharks eating a little bit. So let's watch this one for a quick second. So you can see that this was the next day, and you can see how much the water changed. So the day before was really clear, and then on this day, there was a little more kind of sand in the water. Maybe there was a bit more of a storm that night, and so things was a little bit harder to see as well as you could the day before. So super cool hammerhead sharks. Awesome, awesome creatures. So cool to get to spend 6 whole hours hanging out with hammerhead sharks at the bottom in Bimini. So let's see if we can squeeze in one more from each class. Let's start, Miss McIntosh. You guys see someone front and center? Oh, we just lost them. They disappeared. Okay, Miss Davies' class, we'll give you the, oh, okay. They're back too. But Miss Davies' class, do you want to go with your question? Then we'll visit Miss McIntosh again.
Okay, Miss Lowe.
What is the rarest the rarest
creature?
Yeah, creature in the ocean that you've seen?
That's tough. One of the really rare ones I haven't seen, but I know it's really rare, is the angel shark. There's some species of angel sharks and also the soft tooth shark, you ever seen a picture of those sharks? It looks like they have a big saw. Yeah, so some of those around Florida and South Africa, those angel sharks that I just mentioned, some scientists think there might only be a few of those left, maybe less than 100, maybe a little over 100 in some cases. So those are super rare. But then when I was diving in Cozumel, tiny island off the coast of Mexico, I saw some splendid toadfish. And splendid toadfish are only found in one spot in the whole world. So they're called endemic because you can only find them around this tiny little island off the coast of Mexico. So I was really excited that I got to see one of those kind of hiding in a little cave in the coral because they usually only come out at night. So that's probably one of the rarest things I've ever seen, mostly because you can only find it in one tiny spot in the whole world. All right, Mrs. McIntosh, let's see if we can get that question in. I think you'll have to unmute for me though, because I didn't mute it when you came back in. I think they're there. Hey, Ms. McIntosh. Oh, okay. I think they might be having trouble. Maybe their signal isn't really cooperating with them right now, which happens sometimes, but maybe I'll give them 10 seconds to see if they can pop back in, and I'll check for one more question on YouTube that we can answer, just in case that they manage to come back in with us. 10 seconds to see. All right. Have you ever seen the gray? Okay, so I've got, what was the purpose of that expedition? That's a great question. So the Monterey Bay National Marine Sanctuary is fairly, I don't want to say well explored, but especially along the coast, there's been lots of expeditions, but we were going to a spot called Davidson Seamount that hadn't really been explored before, especially in the area that we were. And the purpose was a few reasons. One, to map the area, because we want to get good maps of the entire ocean floor. And the last reason, well, I mean, there's more than just that, but the other really big important reason is we wanted to see what was there, right? Because just because something is protected as a marine sanctuary or a national park, it's not always kept that way. So if we don't go to these places and we show why they're important and what kind of creatures live there and why it needs to be protected, sometimes places can be taken off of their protection and then we can lose them forever. So that was a big part of the expedition, was seeing the biodiversity, the different kinds of life there, and then documenting it to bring it back to make sure that Davidson Seamount will stay protected part of the ocean. All right, well, huge thank you to our YouTube classrooms. Thanks for tuning in. I hope you enjoyed the Hangout. I know it was a little different than what was planned, but sometimes things don't always go as expected. And then Ms. McIntosh's class, Ms. Reed's class, they've had to duck out for their periods, but thank you for joining. And Mrs. Davies' class, your microphone's on if you want to say goodbye. Thank you so much for hanging out today.
Bye.
All right, awesome. Everybody enjoy the rest of your week, and hopefully we'll see you on another Exploring by the Sea of Pants event. Thanks, everyone.
See ya.